Hi everyone. I'm just going to explain how to make a illustration with Adobe Illustrator that demonstrates the following: a gradient, and I've used two gradients here, one here and one in the sun, and also I've created a landscape with my pattern as well, and my pattern has been put on top of another color which happens to be a gradient. So I'm just going to explain how I did that, and hopefully this will help you complete your own landscape. So the first thing we need is we need to make sure that we have all the right palettes out. So I've got my gradient palette, I've got my stroke here. You can sort of put your palettes in one another just to tidy things up a bit. So there's my stroke, I've got my layers and my swatches. And from my swatch palette, I was able to access my patterns that I made last week from my swatch library. So here's these little books here indicate that there's a swatch library, and these are all swatches that you're most welcome to use. They're color swatches with different themes, but the one that I actually want is the one that I made. And so you need to go to user defined. I made quite a few, and the one that I want was sticks, because that's where I had this lovely stick-like pattern, and that's just here now. So the first thing that I did was I created a new file, and I also opened up my swatches. So this is my just a screenshot because I'm going to use it for my new document that I'm just about to make. So I'm going to make a new document. So it's File, New, and because it's an illustration, I'm going to click Illustration, and I've already made this document. It's 1920 by 1080. So it's coming up again, 1920 by 1080 point. So if you don't have that, you can view all presets and you can make a custom one. And even if you can't find anything, just click on one and then just put in these this measurement in points. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call it landscape. I'll call it landscape 3, and it's horizontal or landscape, and I'm going to click create. Okay, and so there it is. I'll just shrink it down a bit there. So what I'm going to do is just grab this one, and hopefully I can just drag that on to there. Okay, good. So there's my swatches with all the colors that I want, and whenever I want to use any of these colors, all I have to do is use my eyedropper tool and select the color. So if I click on that and say I wanted to select this pale blue, it comes up here in the swatches, and so if I draw a shape, it's going to be that pale blue that I've just got from my swatches. There we go. That's how you make a colored background. It's simply a rectangle. Okay, oops. And if I want to move that around, I just use this move tool and I can just drag it. Oops, I'll just move it down. Okay, stretch it over. Now, I want to show you how to do a gradient. So this is the gradient here. Now, if you can't see any of these palettes, just go to Window and check them. Okay, everything with a tick on it is a palette that is currently visible. So just simply go there. So I'm just going to click on that, and the default is to make a black and white gradient, but that's not what I want. So what I do want is to use maybe this dark blue and this light blue to create a gradient. So over here, this is where I'm going to work. I'm going to work here. So if I double click that, I can actually change this white color to another color. So I could select it from this palette. I could select it from there. I could select it from here, or I can use my eyedropper tool and select it from this swatch. So I'm going to choose blue. So now I've got this light blue and it's moving over to black. So let's change the black now. So double click, use this, which is my eyedropper. Sorry, it's a color picker, but it's like an eyedropper. And let's pick this dark blue. And so now I've got this beautiful gradient that's going left to right. Now, what if I wanted the gradient to go up and down? I can just use the move tool, select that. If I grab a corner, it gives me the sort of the double-headed arrow. I can just simply do that, or even flip it sort of the other way so the dark is at the top. So just can do that. Okay, and now I can just grab these little dots and just stretch it out. So I can do that. It's a little bit like Photoshop in that you can just transform your shapes with a move tool by grabbing those little dots. So there we go, there's the other one. So, oops, just be careful you don't move the whole thing. You need a double arrow, which can be tricky. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to draw some mountains or a few waves. Okay, so I'm going to use the pen tool, which we're all familiar with. And before, so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to start drawing. I think I want that color. So I'm just going to use my eyedropper. Now make sure you haven't got anything selected because it will change the color. Okay, I've chosen that color and I'm just going to draw a landscape with it. So just a really kind of simple one. And don't forget, when you're using this tool, you have to, the first and last dots need to meet to create an enclosed shape for it to actually work. Now, if I want to go horizontally or vertically, I can click the Shift button on my keyboard and it'll give me a perfectly horizontal or vertical line. See how that's crooked? If I click Shift, it will go straight. And then I can join that, and that now will stay colored. Okay. I can also use this tool, which lives behind there, the anchor point tool, and I can edit those as well. So maybe I'll turn them into waves. Okay, so we already had a play with these before. If I wanted to, I can sort of create a gradient out of that too by simply selecting that shape with this tool and then going over to the gradient. But I'm not going to. I'm going to show you how to do a sun, and then I'm going to show you how the layers work. So I'm just going to use the ellipse tool, okay, to create the sun. Again, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to use, I don't have to stick to these colors strictly, but I will try to. I think I'll use that. Oops, that's what happens when you have something selected. So I'll click out of it. So click out of there, select that with the eyedropper. All right, and now I'm going to draw an ellipse with this tool. And if I click Shift at the same time, it will give me a perfectly round circle. Now I can add a gradient to that if I wish. Again, if I can go up, I can go here, right? That's not the color I want, obviously. I can double click that and I can just pick another color. Like I could pick a color from here and then double click that. And I think I might use this color. Oops. Get the eyedropper and pick that color. And so that looks better. Now, you'll notice that, you know, the sun is on top of the waves. And how do I get it behind the waves? Well, let's have a look at our layers over here. And you can see the ellipse. And these are all sub layers because they're underneath this layer 1. And we'll talk about what to do with those later, because when you export this document, if it has all these layers as sub layers, you can't actually export it as a Photoshop file with lots of layers. But don't worry about that because there is a trick around it. But let's not talk about that now. So we'll talk about it later. Now, this is the sun, and you can see it's on top of the wave. So I can actually just change the order and I can put it behind. And what's nice about that is that later on, when I decide to animate this, I might actually do a sunrise or a sunset and have the sun moving. Okay, so you can do that as well. Okay, so of course, in order to do that, you must always save this whole document as an AI file, okay, an Adobe Illustrator file. And that means that every time you open it on Illustrator, all these layers are still visible, which allows you to also use it as a very good background in your animation. So I could make a bird that sort of, flies and then swoops under the waves and then reappears in front of the sun. So I might decide to do something like that. But you will need to retain all these layers. And I forgot to talk about the stroke. So, if I want a stroke on something, I just click on it and I can add a stroke. And there's a stroke you can see. And you can change the color of that stroke by simply clicking on the stroke tool and double clicking it and picking another color. Okay, so we can do that. Yep, and I wanted to show you how I could apply my pattern on top of this existing color. Now, my patterns actually have a transparent background. So what I need to do is I need to create this shape again. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to drag it down to this plus sign. Now I've got 2. Can you see 1, 2? And I'm just going to change the top one to the pattern of my choice. So there, I've got the foreground selected and I can pick the pattern. Okay. Now, if I didn't have 2 layers, say if this one wasn't there, I would just have a pattern. So what I've done is I've got this layer, which is the blue layer, right? And then on top of it, I've got my pattern. So if you want your pattern to appear on top of something, simply select it and then make a duplicate of it. So repeat it by putting it in here. So you've got 2. So now you've got the colored one, and this one can be the one that you actually change. So there you go. I've added a different pattern, which I just found up here. I've got all these other patterns, and you can see that the pattern is actually going on top of the color underneath, which is quite exciting. There you go. It's even more interesting when you use your own patterns. So if you need to kind of, continue making patterns, go ahead and do so to add to your landscape. Okay, so let's leave it at that. Have a little play, and of course make your landscape a lot more exciting than mine. It's very simple. So the last thing I'm going to do today is just simply show you how to save it as an Adobe Illustrator file so that these layers are never lost. Okay, so I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to save it on my computer, and it's called Landscape 3. I've got a Yukai Do folder because this is where we're kind of getting all our inspiration from, and it's an Adobe Illustrator file, and that means I can go back, open it, and get my layers back, and so on and so forth. Then I'm just going to click Save. Always do that. Always save your work. So we just press OK, and there it's in my folder for later use. Okay, and of course, I can already see the potential of being able to move certain layers when I'm going to create an animation in Term 4.